Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. A beautiful young woman wearing both a white halter top and a strapless yellow dress made an Instagram video to explain how she would take advantage of men. She is describing the female sociopath's playbook, and it is frightening. I'm Donna Anderson, author of Lovefraud.com, and I'm dedicated to helping your true recovery from betrayal by a sociopath. Tonight, I'm going to comment on this Instagram reel. The young woman explains 11 steps for exploiting men. At the end of my short presentation, I'll answer your questions. To be notified about all of my upcoming YouTube videos, please hit the subscribe button. All right, let's get started. Here's how the young woman's video begins. She says, "If I use my powers for evil instead of good, I would take advantage of every single man. It would be easy, and this is exactly what I would do." So her name is Elise Michaels, and her dark psychology Instagram reel is entitled How I Would Take Advantage of Men. She explains how she can manipulate men to get what she wants. You absolutely must watch this video. There's a link in the description below this window. So here are the 11 steps for manipulation according to Elise. Number 1, identify the core of his vulnerability, spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. 2, take note of his traumatic moments and meaningful moments. 3, create a relatable story so he would feel connected to her. 4, make him a hero in her life so he is more chemically attached to her. Here's number 5. Find his insecurities and love bomb him. Number 6, ever so slightly, that's what she says, nitpick at what makes him proud of himself. Number 7, do things for him that his mother didn't do. Number 8, drop the bomb. Find a small thing that he's done wrong, pick a fight, and make him feel guilty. Here's number 9. Drop the ask. He'll do whatever she says in order to redeem himself. Here's number 10. Return to the hero scenario. Make him feel like he saved the situation. And finally, number 11. With this, she has secured the addiction cycle. Elise Michaels just explained a step-by-step outline of sociopathic seduction. Her playbook is absolutely accurate for both male and female sociopaths. So let's take a closer look at some of the steps that she described. First, she says the key is identifying the target's vulnerabilities. All sociopaths do this. They figure out what your vulnerabilities are and then use them to seduce you. So how do they do it? They ask you, and you tell them. This starts in the very beginning of your involvement. The sociopath asks a lot of questions and listens very carefully to your answers. You feel like your new romantic interest thinks you're fascinating. You believe that you're getting to know each other. You willingly share your hopes and dreams. You reveal the deepest desires of your heart. And that's where the sociopath sets the hook. Then, once Elise understands her target's vulnerabilities, she says that she creates a relatable story. That's what she calls it. Well, this is similar to the sudden soulmate concept that I talk about in my book, Red Flags of Love Fraud, 10 Signs You're Dating a Sociopath. That's it right there. It seems like the two of you have the same desires and the same sorrows. In fact, you have so much in common that finding each other could only be destiny. At least that's what you think. Actually, the truth is that the sociopath figures out what you're looking for and then becomes that person. You think you've met your soulmate when she is only a fake reflection of yourself. Elise also mentions chemical attachment. This is a real thing. All romantic relationships, even normal ones, involve chemical attachment. There are two key chemicals that are involved in this, and those are oxytocin and dopamine. Oxytocin is a hormone and neurotransmitter that is released naturally in our brains and our bodies when we experience intimacy. Any kind of intimacy will do it: physical touch, conversation, and certainly sex. Oxytocin causes us to feel calm and content, and it makes us trust the person with whom we experience the intimacy. That's why it's also called the cuddle chemical. Dopamine now has multiple functions. Regarding romantic relationships, it is related to pleasurable reward and motivation. The Cleveland Clinic explains that dopamine is called the feel-good hormone. It gives you a sense of pleasure. Dopamine is highly associated with addiction. It doesn't actually cause addiction, but you can become addicted to an activity or a person that spurs the release of dopamine in your brain. When the sociopath is showering you with attention and affection, it causes your dopamine to spike. So that's how you get addicted to the relationship. This is the beginning of the psychological love bond. All relationships are based on psychological bonds that you feel with your partner. The bond is established through pleasure, especially in the beginning. And that's why sociopaths engage in love bombing, to make you feel pleasure. While you're enthralled with your relationship, the sociopath then does something to make you feel bad. Elise Michaels described it as nitpicking. Your partner could also ghost you, blow you off, or lash out in anger. You worry about losing your magical relationship when this happens. And this upsets the bond and causes fear and anxiety. But here's the kicker. Fear and anxiety actually strengthen the love bond that you feel. You want the relationship to go back to how wonderful it was in the beginning. So you ask the sociopath if you can talk. You try to figure out what went wrong. You may even apologize for something that you never did. You get back together with the sociopath, which brings you relief and strengthens the psychological love bond again. So this then becomes a pattern. Pleasure, followed by fear and anxiety, followed by relief, rinse and repeat. It's a vicious circle, and with each turn of the wheel, the psychological love bond gets tighter and tighter and tighter. So here's the next kicker. Even if you no longer feel pleasure, the psychological bond is still in place. In other words, even when you know the involvement is bad for you, you can't leave. You have become addicted. Sociopaths pursue romantic relationships not for love, but for exploitation. This is exactly what Elise Michaels is explaining, as she acknowledges at the end of her video. She says, and here's the quote, "If someone is emotionally unattached, if they are just in it for their own gain, they use formulas that work. They look at behavior patterns and just go with the formula to get what they want." So there you have it. Sociopathic seduction. By the way, when you look at the video, be sure to pay attention to the woman's eyes. They're black and empty, like a shark. If you ever encounter anyone with eyes like these, beware. So that's the presentation for tonight. If you've been exploited by a sociopath, feel free to reach out to me. I am dedicated to your true recovery from betrayal. I help you to understand what happened and overcome the emotional pain. For more information, please visit lovefraud.com/talk to Donna. Also, be sure to check out the True Lovefraud Stories podcast. I'm the host of the podcast, and that's where survivors tell their own outrageous stories of betrayal. I also interview experts who address issues that come up in the stories. So you can listen wherever you get your podcasts, also on YouTube and YouTube Music, or at lovefraud.com/podcasts. And please subscribe to Lovefraud Live, this channel. When you subscribe, you'll automatically be notified about all my new videos. Plus, by subscribing, you'll boost the distribution of Lovefraud Live, so you'll help to spread the word about the dangerous sociopaths who live among us. If you want more information, you can also subscribe to the Lovefraud newsletter. You'll find many helpful links in the window below this video. So now I'll answer your questions. Aha! So Claire says she's finally here for the live. Welcome, Claire. I'm so glad that you're here. Okay, so Claire asks, "Oh my, that's very cynical of her. Good for you, Donna, for picking up on her and teasing it apart for us. Does this sound like what James did to you?" Yep, it does. And I can say that what she laid out was the playbook, the absolute playbook that most sociopaths use when they seduce people in romantic relationships. Well, in my case, it was pretty simple for my sociopathic ex-husband to figure out my vulnerabilities. I was just about to turn 40 years old and hadn't been married, and my biological clock was ticking. So yeah, click, 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 click. I was a sitting duck, for him. And so he just promised me the world. He found out what I was interested in, told me that we would make a wonderful team and that we would be very successful and live in the lap of luxury, and just kept promising all this stuff. And then, yes, he did do things to create fear and anxiety. He would kind of it took a little while to get to that, because, while he was still reeling me in, I mean, everything was fabulous. But eventually he would disappear. He would criticize me. He would lash out. He would be very negative. He would do things to upset me. So yes, and then I would try and make up. And so yeah, I have seen this movie, and I've also spoken to many other people who have also experienced this, and I talk about it in my book, Red Flags of Love Fraud. So I do recommend that when after this video, you actually watch what her Instagram video is, because it is frightening. So one of the things, of course, this particular video is a woman explaining how female sociopaths take advantage of men. And this is probably a bigger problem than you think, because there's a lot of people, there's a common wisdom that there are far more male sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists than there are female. And keep in mind, when I refer to a sociopath, I'm referring to people who have serious personality disorders in which they exploit and manipulate others. And I'm using the word as it was originally intended when the term sociopath was coined. It meant anything deviated or pathological in social relations. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about a sociopath. And I'm using it for an umbrella term for all the cluster B personality disorders, which are antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, and histrionic, plus psychopathy. Okay, so the common wisdom, and if you look into this at all, you'll find all these statements that there are more men who have these disorders than there are women. But last year, this psychologist or researcher in the UK came out with a study that threw a lot of cold water on this whole idea. And he cited that most researchers tend to think there are like six psychopaths to one male, six male psychopaths to one female psychopath. I've seen story information saying that it's a ratio of 4 to 1, 4 male to 1 female. But this doctor, Dr. Clive Boddy, and that's his name, Boddy, I guess that's how you say it, Boddy. He did this research, and he believes that the ratio is probably more like 1.2 male to 1 female, which is like, 5 times more women than people expected. And the way he came up with this is that, and he was talking specifically about psychopaths, so that's why I gave you the little explanation in the beginning about the different types of disorders. But specifically with psychopaths, when you evaluate someone's level of psychopathy, there's 2 aspects to the criteria. There's the aspect that they call the core psychopathy, which is the actual traits of like grandiose, lack of empathy, those type of traits. And then there are the antisocial behaviors like criminality, recidivism, juvenile delinquency, all those type of things. So they call it factor 1 and factor 2. And factor 1 is the core traits that are kind of inborn to these people, and factor 2 are the behaviors. So if you only look at factor 1, which are the core traits, that's where you see that men and women have them almost equally. The difference is that the antisocial behaviors, the men engage in a lot more of those criminality type things than the women do. But when you look at the core traits, it's pretty evenly distributed. And there's another thing when it comes to like borderline personality disorder. The people who are diagnosed with this disorder are predominantly women. It's like 75% women who get diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Although there's research and a book written by Dr. Donald Dutton who talks about how violent men probably, he identifies 3 types of wife beaters. That's what the story was about. And one of them is people that have borderline personality disorder. So they're the men. So anyway, the other thing that happens is that a lot of therapists are reluctant to diagnose a woman with antisocial personality disorder, so they say that the person has borderline personality disorder. So for all these reasons, there probably are far more disordered women than we are led to believe, which is why it's so important to understand how these women behave. Okay. So Claire says, thanks for your ability to zero in on exactly how they can trap us. A woman has done this to a dear friend of mine, and it's awful. Yes, absolutely. The other thing to keep in mind, as far as female sociopaths is concerned, is female sociopaths as mothers. I mean, to put it bluntly and concisely, female sociopaths make terrible mothers. And I have heard of many, many stories of people describing how cold and unempathetic and disinterested and sometimes even neglectful and abusive their mothers were. And female sociopaths are incapable of providing the type of love and guidance that all children need. They just can't do it. They don't have it in them. So even though they may provide basic food, shelter, education, medical care, something like that, they can't really give kids love. they can't be interested in their growth and development. I mean, if they care about the kids at all, it's only as, decorations for them, and trying to make them look good. That's why I've heard of many cases, where all the kids have, great clothes and everybody goes to church, but you get home and, there's absolutely no interaction, no love or guidance at all with the kids. And this is really hard on people. This is really rough, because what happens is the child senses and recognizes that they're not getting the type of love that they think they should get or that they crave, but they don't know what the problem is, so kids blame themselves. And consequently, kids try to figure out, how to please the parent and this is how people end up becoming perfectionists. It's how they end up becoming people pleasers. And it also is what makes people who have disordered mothers and fathers, but, including the mothers, it makes them vulnerable to sociopaths down the line, because these wounds are really deep. And in fact, when I do consultations, I talk to people and we talk about, typically it's about romantic relationships, not always, but often. And so we talk about whatever's going on in this relationship, and eventually we get to, well, what made you vulnerable to this? And I can't tell you how many times people have said about their parents, either their mother or their father engaged in this type of behavior. And, that's where the vulnerability comes from. So that's what I address when I work with people is how to get to that really deep pain that caused the problems to begin with and how to release it. So yeah, it's quite possible for women to be disordered. Oh, Claire says, oh yes, this woman is a terrible mother. She has mixed twins and indulges the boy, but is parentifying the girl. It's absurd. That's really interesting. That is typical when you have a disordered parent. They typically what you have is the golden child and scapegoat routine. Where one child can do no wrong and the other child can do no right. And they play the kids against each other. They triangulate with other people. So yeah, that's absolutely what goes on. Okay, so if you have found yourself in this situation, there's another resource that Lovefraud offers. One of our instructors for our webinars, Mandy Friedman, has a program called How Abusive Parents Affect You and How You Can Recover. It's at education.lovefraud.com, and it's really good. Mandy's excellent, and this particular program can certainly help you if you have been in this situation where your parent was like this. So that's a webinar. It's available online, and it can certainly help you out if that's what you'd like to do. So, Claire says, Donna, you're the best. Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all Claire's comments. And so it looks like that's all we have as far as comments and questions today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today at Lovefraud Live. And we'll see you next week, next Tuesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Good night.